About 10 years ago or so, there was this famous clip of Alex Jones. You know, the one that says, "They turned the friggin' frogs gay!" or something like that. If you were active on the internet back then, I'm pretty sure you would see some memes about it here and there. You'll see it in shirts, stickers, or perhaps even random conversation out of nowhere on the internet. Well, to be clear, what's important was not exactly frogs being gay. What's important is how the government puts chemicals that turn the frogs gay, which could also potentially affect humans. Well, that's the conspiracy theory at least. I'm not saying it's true. Technically speaking, it should be called the gay chemical conspiracy theory or something like that, but me and my friends remember that as the gay frog conspiracy theory. Anyway, was that theory even scientifically rational? Yes, kinda. Long story short, yes, there was a basis for it, but it was getting more and more debated, and there were some complicated things surrounding it. So let's talk about it. First of all, let's take a look at the actual basis of the conspiracy theory. The main basis. This is the one: herbicides, feminization of male frogs in the wild, published in Nature journal back in 2002. This is a famous publication with hundreds of citations, and just in case you didn't know, that is a lot of citation. Anyway, this article talks about the potential danger of waterborne atrazine contamination in the USA. Atrazine is the most commonly used herbicide back then, or maybe it still is actually. I'm not exactly sure about that. This article stated the exposure of waterborne atrazine causes male frogs to turn into hermaphrodites. But what exactly was being done in this research? There are two main things. First, they exposed northern leopard frogs larvae with various concentrations of atrazine. The result: exposed males apparently developed testicular oocytes. Oocytes are immature egg cells, which is normally found in females, of course, but in this case, it's inside male testes. Not only that, they also exhibit retardation of gonadal development. So basically, they showed hermaphroditism, to a certain extent at least. That's the first major things that were reported in this publication. The other one is wild leopard frogs in various regions in the USA exhibit this gonadal abnormality, even reaching 92% of the population in some areas. And yeah, that was the actual scientific result of that research. That's what was reported in the publication at least. So, the frogs are not exactly being turned gay. Well, that depends on your definition of gay, I guess, but I personally wouldn't say so. By the way, this publication was just a short communication. There was another one published by the same first author back in 2010. Atrazine induces complete feminization and chemical castration in male African cloth frog, Xenopus laevis. Now that title packs more punch compared to the 2002 short communication article. So, what was being reported in this article? Well, it's basically the same thing, but expanded. Oh, and it's a different species of frog, by the way. The feminization that was being talked in this article is the lack of male morphological characteristics, namely, no visible nuptial pads on the forearm and protruding cloacal labia. Those two are the easily noticeable traits, at least. Besides that, exposed males had reduced testosterone levels, altered larynx structure, and reduced number of testicular tubules with mature sperm bundles. These changes affect their reproduction success rate. Normal males outcompete them in finding mating partners. Not only that, they are also less fertile compared to normal males. Still, they don't turn gay, and they don't turn into females. They are still males, so even though I cannot say for sure that the USA government aren't doing some kind of chemical sussy things, what I can say based on the evidence is, it is not turning the friggin' frogs gay at least. Anyway, aside from those two articles, there are some lesser known publications that also support this finding. There are various publications by Professor Hayes which supports this claim, but that is not shocking, right? It's the same researcher after all. Of course, most of the research would line up with each other. Still, there are various publications by other researchers that also line up with Professor Hayes' work. Perhaps the most famous one is this one by researchers from Canada. Low levels of the herbicide atrazine alter sex ratios and reduce metamorphic success in Rana pp and tadpoles raised in outdoor mesocosms. This publication showed exposed male frogs having testicular oocytes in them, and also produced higher female ratios. Still, not gay. At this point, we already established that fact, but I just want to point that out. Anyway, things weren't that simple though. I did say it was getting more and more debated, didn't I? So, let's talk about it further. There were various debates on the topic. The main one is this publication in 2008 right here. Does atrazine influence larval development and sexual differentiation in Xenopus laevis? That's the title of the article, by the way, in case you were not looking at the screen. Experiments in two independent laboratories were done in this publication, one at Wildlife International in Maryland, USA, and the other in Leibniz Institute of Freshwater Ecology and Inland Fisheries, aka IGB. That's in Berlin, Germany. Oh, in case you are wondering, IGB stands for Institut für Gewässerökologie und Binnenfischerei. What this research showed was nothing basically. By that I mean, atrazine has no effect in frogs' growth, larval development, nor sexual differentiation. And then there was one publication by Japanese researchers that was, let's just say, on the middle of both sides. Effect of atrazine on metamorphosis and sexual differentiation in Xenopus laevis. This publication showed no hermaphroditic froglets, but there was statistical increase in female ratios for those that were exposed with 10 and 100 part per billions concentration of atrazine. Oh, by the way, when increase in female ratios were mentioned in these publications, they were determined by looking at their gonad though, which, if you look at the 2010 publication that I showed before, that could be a feminized male, not actual female. Still, of course, not gay. Okay, that might be the last time I say that. Oh, by the way, in 2010, even the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicine Authority chimed in and officially stated that the publication by Professor Hayes did not provide sufficient evidence for reconsideration of current regulations, basically saying that publication is not conclusive. Okay, so both sides have their own evidence. Which side was correct then? Well, nothing is conclusive. However, a certain extent of skepticism can be thrown out to both sides. Professor Hayes is an advocate for banning atrazine, which is why it is understandable if some people think Professor Hayes could be biased. On the other side, atrazine is a product. It is manufactured by Syngenta, and if you look at the 2008 publication, one of the authors is from Syngenta. Not only that, this research was funded by Syngenta, so it is intuitive to think that this research might also be biased. Potentially. Who knows about the actual truth, right? I for sure can't say anything because, first, I'm not the one doing the research, so I can't say for sure about the validity of the data. And second, I am not affiliated with any parties involved, so I don't know what's happening in the background. I'm not even American, and I've never lived in USA, so I don't even know what's the general view about this case. However, I do know that protests against atrazine usage is still going on here and there even to this year. Well, at least to last year, 2024. Because if I remember correctly, the US EPA announced they were raising the allowed concentration of atrazine in their water or something like that. That sparked another wave of protests, right? Do correct me if I'm wrong though. Another thing that I can point out is, research on atrazine effects is not only done for frogs. This kind of research had been done for fishes, reptiles, and even mammals to some extent. But the same thing basically happened. Some publications to debunk them, and some statements by the EPA, and of course by Syngenta themselves. At this point, I feel like I'm looking at arms race, but instead of military capability, it's about scientifically published evidence from both sides. But who knows what'll happen next? Maybe we'll get another publication, or maybe other experiments on a completely different groups of animals, or perhaps nothing at all. We'll see. Tell me what you think about this topic, and if you are a local, Let me know if protests or some kind of propaganda is still going on there. But that's it for this video. And as always, enjoy your day.